They say Taylor was a good girl, never want to be late.
Politics. A word that immediately causes a reaction, whether it is one of unease, one of apathy, or one of profound interest. It is an important part of our national and global ecosystem. In a world that is becoming increasingly divided by the ideas that people have for the future, now more than ever, we need politicians who are willing to engage with their people, because after all, it is the people in which our politicians serve. So to the 6 politicians who have graciously given their time, who have valued being a part of this event, who have turned up to speak to the people in which they represent, I thank you. I think we all thank you. This is democracy at work, and I, for one, do not take this for granted. Now, before I go any further, I would like to share the words of a man who is far wiser than myself. I urge you to keep these words in mind as our politicians give their perspective on the questions that you, the people, have prepared for them. It is the mark of an educated mind to be able to entertain a thought without accepting it. Aristotle got it right. We are an educated species, one that can listen to ideas, disagree with those ideas, and still not accept those ideas. We are not here to argue or belittle one another. We are here to talk about issues that are important to us, to get to know the people who represent us, to listen to the ideas that were voted into power by the people of this community and this country. Now, democracy is a word that can be traced back all the way to Aristotle, an idea that has been dragged through history and shaped by the men and women who believe that the rights of man is something to be protected above all else. We find ourselves at an interesting crossroads, one where democracy may be seen more as a right rather than a responsibility. Now, let me add some context to that statement by sharing some history with you. When Benjamin Franklin left Independence Hall after drafting the Declaration of Independence, he was approached by a woman in the street. The woman said, "Mr. Franklin, what manner of government have you made for us?" And Franklin said, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." And Franklin raises perhaps the most important point of a democracy. The responsibility of a country does not sit in the hands of a privileged few. The responsibility of a country sits in the hands of the people, as long as each and every one of us remembers our duty as a citizen. Democracy is not a free ride. Democracy demands that as citizens we educate ourselves about the people who are running for office, that we engage with the issues that matter to us most, that we participate in one of the most important rights we have, the right to vote. In the previous election, we had almost 80% of our population turn out to vote. Now, while this doesn't sound too bad, let me show you what it actually looks like. 800,000 New Zealanders did not engage with their responsibility as a citizen of New Zealand to vote. 30% of our young people who could vote didn't. And according to the articles that were published about this poor youth turnout, the reason for our inaction was because young people are too lazy, too apathetic, too busy on Facebook. Now, the young people that I spoke with who decided not to vote in the last election did not share this view. Instead, the overwhelming response I received was that they believed their single vote wouldn't change anything. Now, with this in mind, as a teacher, I went on a hunt looking for any current research that proved or disproved this idea, that a single vote doesn't change anything. And I stumbled upon the work of a professor at Harvard University, her name is Erica Chenworth, who believes that she found the answer to this very question. For 12 years, Erica has studied the most successful social movements in the history of the world, from 1900 to 2017. She wanted to understand whether the actions of the people could change the country in which they live. She studied the good, the Black Civil Rights Movement, ending apartheid in South Africa, ending the war in Nam, Gandhi's Salt March, overthrowing a dictator in the Philippines, and overthrowing a dictator in Serbia. And she also studied the bad, the rise of the Nazi Party in Germany, Pol Pot's Khmer Rouge, and the Russian Revolution. Now, before Erica, historians and political scientists used to say that no government, no law, no social issue could survive if just 5% of the population decided to rise up and demand a change against it. Based on Erica's research, she believes that number to be much different. She believes that any social movement will be successful if 3.5% of a nation's population rise up and collectively demand the change that they want to see. It is worth noting that every social movement that affected lasting change was a non-violent one, and that the greatest non-violent act the people possess in a democratic country is the right to vote. In New Zealand, we have many issues. We know this already. We currently have a population that doesn't believe their vote will affect change. Erica's research proves the exact opposite, that one vote, one person, one idea can change the tide of a country if we can collectively mobilise. It's also worth noting that 3.5% of our population is 161,000 people, and that 3.5% of Hamilton's population is only 5,600 people. So it goes to show that the power of a single vote is the greatest power we yield, one that people have dedicated their lives to protecting, one that ensures the future of this country. New Zealand is a young nation, one that is rich in history, one that just celebrated the 125th anniversary of women winning the right to vote, becoming the first country in the world to do this. We currently have a Prime Minister who is the third woman in history to have a baby while in office. The community of Raglan took it upon themselves to become plastic free. We remain nuclear free when the nuclear option was the popular thing to do. We currently have so many groups doing so many amazing things to affect change in this country of ours. You are a part of that change. You are choosing to engage with a conversation that will educate you, that will allow you to make informed decisions about who represents us. You understand the responsibility that comes with being a citizen of this nation. In New Zealand, you live in a democracy, if you can keep it.
Without further ado, now we're going to turn to the people who generously gave up their time tonight to talk to us all about what it is that they live and breathe, which is politics and looking after our democracy in our country, okay? So what we're going to do is that I'm going to ask each speaker to take the mic, and they're going to have 2 minutes to talk to you guys all about themselves. And they have had no brief, so they can talk to you guys about whatever. But the thing is that I know about working with politicians is that they all like to talk. And so what we've got at the front is Gemma with a bell, who's going to time you all. And so if you get to 2 minutes, she's going to ring the bell, and then we're going to all clap so that they know to sit down. Okay? Jamie Strange. Give him a clap, everyone.
Okay, good evening. Kia ora koutou everyone. Well done to Seed for hosting this event. Well done, Holly. There you are. Holly's awesome. She's certainly full of energy, and I see her around Parliament all the time. And thank you very much, everyone, for coming along tonight. And a big thank you to all of the MPs or party representatives. So in terms of introducing myself, so I got to Parliament last year, so I've been in for 1 year. So it was my second time standing. I stood in 2014 down in the Taupo electorate, missed out there, and then stood last time here in Hamilton and managed to make it in on the list. So I'm basically the Labour Party representative for Hamilton. Before being in politics, I was a school teacher, music teacher. So I love music, love sports. Played 7 games of soccer on the weekend, so I could only just walk actually, but just short games. And I before that I was a youth worker as well. So I've always had a heart for people, and I think those 3 jobs probably are very much linked around putting people first. The key reason I entered politics was really was about the next generation. My wife and I got 4 children. We had 4 and 5 years. We didn't get the memo to stop at 2, so they carried on. But we've been really blessed. We've got 2 boys and 2 girls, and I think about what sort of world are they going to inherit? Will they afford to buy a house? Will there be a good public health and education system for them? Will there be a planet that's vibrant and healthy, for them to inherit? And so basically, I wanted to be involved in making some of those key decisions. And I'm certainly really proud of this coalition government. I'm really proud of our Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, who went through this university, as I did, and as many of you currently are or have. I think she's representing us really well, particularly on the world stage. She's an inspiration to all of us. So thank you for having me here tonight.
On the buzzer. All right, second speaker. Donna Pokere. Thank you.
katoa ngā mihi nui ki a koutou e huhui mai nei, ko Waikato, ko Donna Pokere Phillips ahau, no he ahau he uri no Taranaki, kia ora mai tātou. So what I just said is greetings to you all, and I hail from a beautiful place called Taranaki, and I was just talking to Brooke, and her farm is Barbara, and her farm is not far from my marae, so we might have connections there. But anyway, so I'm a mother of 5, and I'm also a grandmother, and I guess the reason why I got involved in politics is because I was concerned about my children and my goodness future. I was an adult student here at Waikato University, so I currently, I did my law degree and I did my Masters in Law, and I do remember a number of lectures here in this particular room. So good on you for doing your degrees. My children, I've got adult children, and most of them, bar my youngest son, all have degrees. Well, they actually have several degrees, and I think that that's important because it gives them versatility. And I see that in the current space that we're in now, you know, you need versatility. I've always said that I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. And the reason why I say that is that you can never put your, put your bet into one area, that you've got to be quite versatile. And I think that that's a challenge for the youth in regards to modernisation, industrialisation, and those sorts of things. So I'm glad that 4 out of 5 of my children have listened to my advice, and that they've got degrees behind them. For example, my second to oldest son, he's a mechanic, he's a cook, and he's a computer operator. So if anything happens in either one of those spaces that he chooses to go in, he's always got a backup. So good on you, and I suggest that you do that. So I've got other degrees behind me as well, not just the law degree, and that's about versatility.
Brooke Van Velden.
Hi, Donna. I'm Brooke. I work down in Parliament as an advisor for David Seymour, and my job is to make sure that the End of Life Choice Bill gets passed as a law. And I think that's, you know, such an easy bill to just kind of outline what ACT stands for. We're for freedom and choice. And that kind of goes for all of our policies. It doesn't matter if you actually want to partake in any of the laws that we promote, but our regulatory framework should allow choice. So a little bit about me is I stood for ACT last election for the first time. I was a one-time Greens voter. I'm a vegetarian, Bikram yogi, environmentalist, so why did I go for the ACT Party? And it's because I actually believe that it's the only party that actually cares about intergenerational fairness. You know, our policies on housing reform, raising the age of superannuation and saving our generation $58 billion just by putting it up by 2 years today. Innovation, technology, getting rid of all the regulatory frameworks that stop businesses being able to innovate and allow us to become world leaders in technology. These are all great reasons, and I could keep going on, but you know, we're just about smaller, smarter government.
Darroch, whoa.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Holly. Thanks, Steve Waikato, and thanks to the sponsors, all the panelists, and just like to acknowledge someone who have Bennett in the audience as well. No questions from that man later on. My name is Darroch. I'm a New Zealand First List MP. I'm based in Palmerston North. I have been an MP since 2014, and main spokesperson roles at this stage and probably the last 4 years as well have been social services, law and order, and youth affairs as well. So I'm looking forward to some discussion, debate and questions, and talking through the panels as well. When I left school, I went to Auckland University and got my degree in biological science. I spent 4 years doing my 3-year degree in med, and I realised at that point that probably the academic pathway wasn't for me. So I ended up joining the army after that, actually, and was a logistics officer for 7 years in the New Zealand Army, based around the country. And one of the things that sort of I found myself during my 20s, because I spent the majority of my 20s in the army, I spent some time with some troubled youth who came through in a boot camp, and that sort of sparked a fire in me about the genuine effort, or even just the genuine care and attention that some adults can give to some troubled youth, and how much they can really change their lives and turn them around. And so when I decided to leave the army and go and complete my graduate diploma in teaching, and after a year of working with youth in the community, and I became a secondary school teacher teaching biology and chemistry before I became a politician. So one of my main passions is with young people in this country, and engage them, making sure you engage them and make sure not only they vote, because we're talking about engagement and voting, but making sure that they have a really informed vote. I think that's most important. So I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to any questions that you may have. I think we've got a really good sort of a bell curve representation here.
Sam Taylor.
Hi everybody. It's been slightly over a year since I was last here speaking for the Green Party, so I'm feeling a little bit nervous, and hopefully you'll be understanding as I kind of warm up and build back into this. I'll just introduce myself first though. So, ko Parogia te maunga, ko Waikato te awa, Ngāti Pākehā te iwi, ko Baron Aberdeen 1868 te waka, Mātangi te kāinga, Ngāti Hoa te tangata whenua o te kāinga, te ao te whānau ko Samaho. So my great-great-grandfather came over here right after the Waikato Wars, and he bought some land off some soldiers who were gifted it as part of the whole confiscation situation. And my family have actually been out at Mātangi ever since, so that's a really interesting link for me in terms of te tiriti, which is like a live issue, and often as a Pākehā we can kind of avoid that. So not so much, it's in our history as well. That isn't at all what I intended to say. Oh, we're in for a good night. So I have the best job in the world. I'm not a politician. I actually work with young people, and I work with families and children who are having a really hard time, and I work with their parents to try and turn that around and help them understand what they can do a little bit differently. So because of that, I think it really intersects with so many of the issues that these guys have touched on and that we'll be talking about tonight. You know, it's housing, it's homelessness, it's actually International Homelessness Day today, I'm not sure if we're aware, and it's also the Mental Health Week. So yeah, some pretty big issues, and I feel pretty privileged to be able to work alongside young people and families as they kind of traverse through all of that. I'm a Hamiltonian. Guess we'll find out more about each other as we go. I'll leave it at that. Thanks so much.
And then there was one, and I'd also like to acknowledge my colleague David Bennett up there. So I came from coastal Taranaki, currently represent the electorate of Taranaki King Country, which starts in a little place called Toko east of Stratford, and it finishes up at the boundary of Ngarawahia. So I've got 4.5 hours of proud rural New Zealand, and very proud, no parking meters and one set of traffic lights at Horatoon. So the reason I went into Parliament was really to represent people. I'd had a history since I'd left school of, started off in accountancy, not an accountant, but worked in an accountant firm. Been on the boards of Dairy NZ, Primary ITO, so my life has been dairy farming. Mount industry training, Taratahi, I got involved later in life in Venture Taranaki, which was around regional development. And in 2012 I was lucky enough to be awarded the inaugural Dairy Woman of the Year. So very proud of that, but it was the thing that gave me the courage and confidence to go into Wellington, because I just feel, people out there were saying how well do people in Wellington understand people that come from rural areas? Because a lot of our people in Wellington come from Auckland, Wellington or Christchurch. I still class Hamilton as a rural city, as I do New Plymouth. Now I've also got a 102-year-old grandmother. I still have my parents. I have 3 children and I have 5 grandchildren aged between 10 and 10 months. And so for me, being in the middle of 5 generations, my husband and I have 136 first cousins between us, so we've got a huge fun now. So when I was put on the Health Committee in the last Parliament, so this is my 2nd term, and I thought, Deputy Chair of Health, what do I know about health? 136 first cousins, huge fun now, lots of people that I know, and I've always felt like representing the people that you elected you. understands the time limit.
Yeah, and I know what you guys are all like. You just keep talking. All right. So now we're going to go to our curated Q&A. All right. So the first question that we've got is the clicker working? Oh, right, there we go. So it is, why are you a politician? And I know Sam mentioned that you're not a politician, but for all intents and purposes tonight you are. So, and what inspired or motivated you to start? So a couple of you would have touched on this during your speeches, but you know, it's open floor. The mics are yours. I'm not going to say much unless I need to get involved in stopping any fights. And I want you guys to take it away.
So, like I said, I was in the army for the majority of my 20s. And it was kind of not until, it was more like a hindsight thing that I realised that I was convinced that I should go down the political pathway. But I realised that I was just really, really over-opinionated about everything. And that I wanted everybody to know. Now, if you can imagine being in the army, right, and going to the mess and having a few beers with your mates, and all that I wanted to do was talk about politics, talk about the recent cabinet reshuffle, about the budget coming up next week, and they you know, but I didn't realise at the time until afterwards, and I thought, maybe that's not a normal sort of thing for a 20-something-year-old, and it sort of dawned on me. So I didn't go and do a political degree. I didn't have ambitions when I was younger to be a politician. It was something that sort of dawned on me later on. I thought maybe I could or should. Really, it was more like I should. Give it a go, you know, that's really how I fell into it. I didn't set out to get there, but I sort of fell into it, and I think that's the same sort of reasoning behind why I'm with New Zealand First as well. I didn't set out to go and sort of pick a political party. I found out and realised after a little while that pretty much everything that I was thinking, New Zealand First had policies or principles or ethos or values that represented that. And I wanted to stand up for New Zealand First, and the party provoked that, and that's how I got into politics.
Yeah, well, I mentioned before about my family, but the other thing, a couple of things would be leadership. I've always admired people who have the courage to take on leadership roles. I've been a bit of a student of leadership, and I hope I'm a good leader. And I sort of always wanted to be a leader for a region, and so, you know, working hard for this region. And the second one is around education. So as I mentioned, I'm a music teacher, and back in 2012, the previous government were going to scale back the specialist subjects in intermediate schools, so music, art, PE, those sort of things, and that was one of my areas. Fortunately, they backed down and they didn't do it, but that sort of made me a little bit worried, because I believe in a diverse curriculum, broad curriculum, and as a music teacher I wasn't just teaching, you know, the skills, it was confidence, creativity, cooperation. So there's a couple of other things.
I don't think I'd have as much as I do in common with Darroch.
Why not?
But we're quite similar in that respect, that I never set out to be a politician or want to be a politician. And I've always been quite a shy person, so even putting myself out there as a candidate last year was one of the scariest things I've ever had to do. But I became really passionate about politics in my last year of university, because I studied economics and international trade. And as I was getting further through, my studies became more independent, and I started looking more into market structures and free markets. And I never really looked at the ACT Party before that, until I looked at the website, met David Seymour, and I went, I actually agree with everything he's saying. And I think there's a lot of young people out there who do agree with everything that he says. They're just a little bit afraid to admit it, and I wasn't. And I put myself forward because I wanted other young people out there to know that there are young people in ACT. Because when I met David, I didn't know any. They were all old white men, as I've been led to believe. But there are, and there is, a growing youth wing. And I hope it continues, because we need more liberalism in this country.
I'm really enjoying hearing everyone's stories and learning more about each other. The political yarns at a pub, and you realise maybe I need to do something with this. Totally resonates, my poor friends. I'm not sure if that's an appropriate thing to do. Never mind. So for me, see, what's my story? I think like in some ways I can't think of a single reason not to be involved in politics. So it's an interesting thing when people say, oh, why? It's like, oh God, like why wouldn't you? Every structure, every aspect of your life is in some way shaped by politics. And for me, I'm really lucky, I'm a really privileged person, but other people aren't. And seeing those kind of justice issues and just being so frustrated, like, why isn't that person able to have the same opportunities as I am? And then you start to understand and unravel and unpick more and more around the world. So some of the big issues for me during my childhood actually were around the environment and waste. And learning this little fact that Hamilton produced 8 busloads of waste a day. Like, where is that going? We can't sustain that. What are we doing about it? And like, fast forward sort of 20 years and we still haven't closed the loop on our waste systems. So those problems, those niggles, those daily life experiences are fundamentally political challenges. So for me, I think I'm in politics because we just needed change. We need change with climate, with action on poverty, with issues around education. There are so many things that you can point to. And I think the real thing is that we are losing an opportunity, you know, in not addressing climate change. And we are losing an opportunity to build a more just, equitable, thriving society that is just better for everyone and for all of the species that we're harming and for all of the waste that we're wasting, you know, like those are resources. We need to close the loop. We need to build a more sustainable kind of economy and way of life, and I just think that's better for everyone. So politics is a slow, frustrating way to try and achieve that, but it's an important part of it, so that's why I want to be involved in it, certainly, yeah.
So the number one thing that I wanted to achieve when I got into politics was to try and close the urban-rural divide. And that is because we're all human beings that want a good education for our kids. We all want a good health system close to where we live. We all want good water. We all want good productivity. We all want people to be happy and healthy and well. And I found that there was quite an urban-rural divide growing. But when I was the Dairy Woman of the Year, I did a course with 20 women from Auckland, 4 from Wellington, and me who used to go in and out of Queen Street. And couldn't wait to get back to, the smaller part of the world. Queen Street wasn't my favourite place, but the women were. And I found out that actually we all had so much in common as people, and the urban-rural divide only exists if we let it, because it's a communication thing, and we've all got to get together and decide what we can do with climate change, what we can do with water. And just one thing, the other day I walked into, I was in a place in Te Awamutu, and a person from Aotearoa Tamariki came in and said, "Oh, we've got a member of the house here." And I said, first and foremost, I'm a member of the community, and then I'm a member of the house, and I think that's what's important to me.
Kia ora. So the reason why I got involved in politics is because I didn't want to be a politician, but I'm a born advocate. So all of my adult life, all I've done is advocate for communities, advocate for the environment. In regards to my professional background, I was either a senior policy advisor, principal policy advisor. So I didn't actually practice law. I felt that it was more important to influence the law, and so I went down that track. Currently, I've been a consultant for about the last 5 years, and to my husband's dismay, I must say, because a lot of my work is pro bono. So he reckons he married the poorest lawyer in New Zealand. But I get a lot of satisfaction out of the work that I do, and especially over the last, particularly the last 10 years, even when I was working. So I've worked at corporate, local and central government, so I've done the gambit. And I guess my most satisfying part of the work that I do is what I do now. And I guess for me, what pushed me into politics is that I do advocate for the homeless. I do advocate for families that need help with loans, or families that need help with trying to get into a state house. And I created what you call a cultural impact assessment. So my professional background is Māori resource management, so I specialise in resource management and planning. And so when I got the knock on the door and people wanted me to advocate for them, I created what you call a cultural impact assessment that now, so I can hand on heart say that I've kept some of our whānau out of jail because of those cultural impact assessments. So I'm pretty proud of that. You don't get paid because these people don't have any money. but there's a lot of satisfaction that I get out of that. So I guess for me, getting involved in politics is about advocating for other people, not so much about myself. Kia ora.
What has been the one personal peak, highlight, and one pit challenge in your career in politics? And again, Sam, you're a politician for the purposes of this question.
Yeah, since I've got the mic, I might as well start. I suppose the highlight for me was getting the nod to be part of the top 6. So what that meant with the Opportunities Party is that if we got the 5% threshold, I would be joining Jamie in Wellington. A couple of weeks before Jacinda came out, we were actually sitting at 3.6, and I thought, oh my gosh, this might really happen. And then, but as all the other parties know, we were impacted by the Jacinda effect, and that didn't happen.
Yeah, that's it.
But hey, I'm in for round 2, so watch out.
For me, and just at the end of year 4, the highlight for me is actually moving through to become the senior whip for the National Party. So that's a pretty responsible position in terms of a team of 56 people. So that was something, when I entered Parliament, I didn't actually know what a whip did. So we do team management and speaking lists and leave requests and all of that sort of stuff. And you know, that's really quite a proud moment to have got to that position in 4 years.
And don't underestimate how busy a whip is and how much responsibility a whip actually does for the party in the House.
Thanks, Darroch. Darroch's a good guy when he's not in the House.
Yeah.
And probably the low point, you know, when you go into politics, I guess you expect, you know, differences. 90% of us get on pretty well 90% of the time. And you will expect people to attack us for our views or various things, but I guess the low point of mine is my family's been under attack for something, and we're working our way through that, and we're going to come out on top of it. But actually, we take on the role, not the families, and I think that for me is a low point, so families should be left alone.
I have a number of highlights actually, and one of them would have to be seeing Chloe Swarbrick in Parliament. I love that, like amazing young woman, and fantastic to see her like rocking it. And actually just other highlights are things like during the campaign, the reason that I started campaigning even was because I was travelling in Myanmar, I met these really amazing people. It kind of forced me to reconcile my own desire to contribute to the country, and it was at the time when Aung San Suu Kyi had just been elected. So I'm not sure if many of you have followed that, but since then it's not really been great. It's a summary of that. So in some ways those are kind of the lows, is that the things that you think and that can like instigate action don't really work out as you may expect. And so to some degree, for the Green Party, first time being in Parliament, big ups, very exciting, Minister for Climate Change. On the other hand, the kind of reality of that and what the party's experiencing, there's been lots of low points and lots of challenges there that I would like to have seen, addressed kind of differently, but that's how it goes, yeah. I actually had, when I made some notes of my high points and low points, and I had a low point, which isn't actually about the political stuff directly in terms of my involvement with it, but it is actually like a story of a young girl that I work with, or I used to work with. I was a youth justice mentor, so that's kids that have been getting into a bit of trouble, sort of 14 to 17. At the time I met her, she was 14. And we worked together like intensively one-on-one for like 90 hours over several months. And one of the questions that she asked me really stuck with me. And she just said to me, Sam, do I look like a criminal to you? And this is like a 14-year-old girl, and I just thought, God, that's a heartbreaking story. Like, why has she, what has she taken from all of her experiences that makes her ask that and think that? So she's actually stayed in touch with me, and where she is now is really my low point, because she's in and out of Henry Bennett. She's on meth, as are her family, so she's like selling herself to try and pay for that. And it's, sorry, it's not a good story, this is the low point. Because there just seemed like there have been so many lost moments of intervention for that girl, and we haven't got it right. And so when I think about her, and I think about her situation, and all of the opportunities we had to intervene, and all of the things we need to radically and immediately do differently as a society, it's to stop more girls like that ending up where she is. Like, so the low point is that we're not there yet. We haven't achieved it. We've got more work to do. And actually, I think that's something that probably everyone would agree with. No one wants those stories like that. So, but that would be it. Actually, more work to do. And I want in the future the high point to be, woo, we solved that. We fixed that. There aren't going to be more girls experiencing what she's experiencing.
I guess one of the biggest highlights for me was gaining the support of other ACT members to be places number 3 on the party list, and then also being endorsed as a candidate by Ruth Richardson, and she's someone that I really look up to, so that was amazing. The low point would definitely be that David was the only person elected back as a representative for ACT. But it does give us the ability to go back, start from the drawing board and think, how can we make this better for next time? What can we do? And so next year, we are having our big rebrand, and I expect we'll get a lot of momentum from thinking, what did we do wrong last time?
Yeah, high point, this political punch event I went to. As an MP, you're in a unique position to sort of have a helicopter view of what's happening in a region, and so for me it's been that really. So all the wonderful things that are happening, from a business point of view, and from a community point of view, from an NGO, and just being able to see things happening and say, hey, look, you should talk to this person, and you could get together with them, and I've sort of been a bit of a connector, really. Another thing around bringing ministers here, to be able to engage with those groups about getting connections. So I've really enjoyed that. I'm a big fan of collaboration, and so it's about bringing people together, and particularly some of the really exciting things around the business sector, whether it's the Inland Port, which is a $3 billion project, whether it's the regional theatre, which we're pitching for the government for, which we're almost there, getting a train up to Auckland. There's so many great things that are sort of underway and about to be unleashed, which is very exciting. And the low point, and I knew it before I went in, but it's time away from family. So basically you fly down to Wellington on a Tuesday morning, sometimes Monday night, but normally I can get in there Tuesday morning and back on a Thursday night. And and then other times during the Friday and Monday, you often need to be away for various things. And so it's just about really prioritising that time when I am with my family to really make the most of it. Put the phone in the drawer, and really focus. But sometimes I'll take the family with me. Like if I'm going to do some work somewhere, I'll take them with me, and even locally. Every weekend event, I always think, well, can I take maybe my 2 girls and my 2 boys, or take one of the kids for that one-on-one, or take my wife and the babysitter, which is the preferred option. But you're just about being intentional. And you guys know this, the busier you are, the more intentional you have to be. So.
You mentioned how you're in Wellington, so you go Tuesday, fly back Thursday. So you want to explain to everyone why you're here today and it's Wednesday?
Oh yeah, good point. So we have a recess. Parliament sits, is it 40 weeks of the year? 30 weeks of the year. You got me there too much.
52.
Got an extra 10. So at various times we get given a break, and that's to come back to the electorate and really focus on what's happening locally. So we're there, and when we're there, like from a Tuesday morning to a Thursday night, we do around 40 hours in 3 days. So they're quite long days. It's sort of 7 a.m. till sort of 10:30, 11 p.m. So pretty much the whole week in those 3 days, and you fly back on a Thursday night, try and get a good sleep, and then Friday you're sort of into it for the weekend.
So if you have nothing to do on a house sitting day, you can tune in and watch these guys in Parliament TV, until 10 o'clock tonight.
Yes, great shows like the Education Amendment No. 2 bill, starring Darroch recently.
We're on tour. So the question is, one personal peak and one pit. Any politician that's here, including David Bennett sitting in the audience, knows that you have hundreds of peaks and pits every week. It is honestly up and down, up and down, up and down. That's just the nature of the profession that we're in. But with my one of the things that I was privileged and I was be a part of, which is a highlight for me. One of the highlights is that with the forming of this current government and throughout the coalition talks and negotiations, I was a part of it. Every New Zealand First MP was, but I was literally sitting at the table for a number of those discussions throughout those weeks, and to be able to see specifically policies that myself have been personally working on throughout when I was in opposition, and to discuss that in a coalition negotiation and see that through, and to have come into law, will be coming into law, it's obviously a massive highlight, and that's why we're politicians, is to make a difference, and you know that was very special. One of the challenges, it's not really a pit, it's just a reality, is that as a politician, you get really thrown in the deep end, especially when, I'm not a beltway baby, which is I wasn't born into politics, or didn't do a political degree and wasn't involved in politics before I became a politician. I was just an ordinary bloke, and hopefully I still am an ordinary bloke. But you just get thrown right in the deep end, and you either sink or you swim. And one of the major differences with being a politician versus any other profession is that, let me say what the similarities with every other profession first. You make mistakes and you go through a learning curve, and you've got to sort of know what you're talking about before you become an effective MP. The big difference is that politicians, every single mistake you've got is on TV. Every single mistake, the media are waiting for you. And it's not really huge mistakes, but it's just experiential mistakes and learning and becoming an effective person in the house and networking and everything like that. And it takes a while. It does. So it's one of the underestimated huge challenges of being a politician is that you're in a fishbowl 24/7. People are watching you, judging you, and criticising the whole time. So that's a challenge.
This next question, which is personally my favourite, you have one or two words, okay? That's all you can say. Alright, so here we go. If your political party was a vegetable, what would it be and why? Take it away, Jamie.
Watermelon. So green on the inside, green on the outside, and the black stalk feeding the.
That's typically the joke about the Green Party, because they're secretly socialists. Take what you want from that. I probably go for broccoli because you don't always like it at first, but it's really good for you.
So for me, with the Opportunities Party, it's a kumara, because we don't like to say how good we are.
I wanted to be a blueberry, but that was a fruit. But I've got something else in common with Sam, because I chose broccoli because broccoli is a superfood and the National Party is a super party.
I went out of the box for this one, and I went with ginger, because ginger is sometimes overlooked as a vegetable, and as we've seen tonight on our graph, ACT wasn't even on there. But we also work very, very well in a coalition, if you think of lemon, honey and ginger.
I think I'll go with spinach. Similar to broccoli, it gets a lot of stick a lot of the time, but it's full of goodness.
Alright. Okay, cool. Next question. Why do you think 30% of young eligible voters didn't vote? What could be done to make voting more accessible and relevant to this group? And I'm going to ask my lovely timer at the front to give each speaker 1 minute. 1 minute. And we're going to go through it, alright?
I wrote so many notes.
Oh, we've got 1 minute, guys.
Right. I mean, the question should be directed at you, really. But from what I've observed, people vote for people they are connected with, or that they can relate to, or they vote for parties they're connected with, or that they can relate to. And so obviously there's not that connection. There's either never has been a connection, or it's broken down. Because quite a few people don't vote because they're just like, oh, I've given up on you lot, as MPs. So for whatever reason, that connection needs to be built. And you mentioned Chloe Swarbrick, who's only 23. And that's one of the great things about MMP. is that we have a very diverse parliament, across a whole range of areas. So hopefully those connections are building, and we can get more people voting.
So I think information, informed voting, and education. Winston Churchill, I get this wrong, but it's words to the effect of the quote. He said, if you want to know what's wrong with democracy, go and speak to the average person on the street. And that's true, because it's about the vast majority of voters don't know what they're voting for or why they're voting for it. If we have proper education, civic system, education system in our schools, and people not only understanding who they're going to vote for or what party, but why it's important and why a robust democracy needs people out there to vote. I think that it works both ways too. I think we're in a little bit of trouble here in regards to politicians and politics in danger of becoming entertainment and wanting to entertain the voters to vote for them. I think that there's one thing of engagement, and the other way is it's two-way street. That the voters of this country, young people of this country, need to be informed themselves.
Unrelated to my answer, but I've just noticed your socks and I love them.
Thank you.
Is that your answer?
No.
Colourful socks.
So I'm pretty much just going to have to read my bullet points out to you to get through this. Couple of stats. 26.8% of the voting public are aged between 18 and 39, but only 12.39% of MPs are under the age of 40. So in terms of what Jamie was saying, I'm not reading my notes. It's absolutely, young people aren't particularly well represented in Parliament at the moment. I think we have a younger Parliament, and the average age is coming down, but for the last government, the average age was still 50, and that was celebrated as being really low. So there is something about seeing yourself in politicians, and for young people, when you're 18 especially, the golf when you're 30, they think, I'm really old, so there's that. Also, I'm not sure, you mentioned Parliament TV before, but the music on Parliament TV, terrible, that turns everyone off straight away. Massive need for civics education in schools, absolutely. I think people really struggle to understand the electoral system and why it matters, and so you get my one single vote doesn't matter when it matters hugely. There are some really tangible barriers like poverty and inequality, and I think politics itself is an institution.
She got through about 2 lines.
There are so many solutions though. Can I? No? Later. Talk to me afterwards.
Ask me questions.
Yeah, ask me the same question, someone.
I'll try not to touch on what anyone else has said, so I'll say that I think a part of it is to do with having a stake in society. And what we're seeing is that people are having children later, and they're also unable to buy homes. And once people start thinking about their children and paying off their mortgage and their taxes, they start worrying about who's going to be in our government. And I think that that's really important, that if we can't get more people into homes, perhaps our voting population will even keep decreasing. And before I got involved in ACT, I was involved in a non-profit organisation called Civics Education, which is non-partisan, goes around schools for free, teaching kids about education. So if you want to get them in the Waikato, I would suggest getting in touch with Civics Education.
Can I just say that civic education is actually a top policy? And I think it's really important. I just thought I'd plug the top there. But I think it's actually really important. Like all the other speakers have said, it's about informing and educating our people. Not only is it Gen X generation and the millennials that aren't voting, it's also Māori and Pacifica, and that's a major concern for me. We do have a number of Māori MPs in Parliament now, and that's really great. And so, I know anecdotally why our people don't vote, and a lot of them say it's because they represent the party and they don't actually represent me. So there's a disconnect with what politicians are saying and what's actually happening on the ground. And I guess that was, I've got Generation X and millennials in my downline, and they pretty much say the same. Well, what's the point? You go down, you end up in Parliament, and Mum will hold you accountable, but you end up in Parliament, and you end up following.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of reasons. One of them, and Darroch touched on the Beltway before, and various speakers have talked about connection. And when I become a politician, people said to me, "So why did you give all that other stuff and go to Wellington to that awful world of politics. And actually it's not that awful, but we do behave a bit stupidly at times as politicians.
Wow.
But I think, the thing is, not you, Darroch, of course. The thing is that all politics is local, and when people realise that what's happening in their house, in their backyard, in their school and in their hospital is about the politics. And I've got 85 primary schools in my electorate, and I do my best endeavour to get around them all. And I can tell you that those kids in those schools, even in primary school, they understand what the issues are. They ask about all sorts of things, and I judge speech contests. And if you want to find out what not only the current generation of people in universities or young people is thinking, going into schools gives you even a more advanced of what our children are thinking. And I think we just need to stay connected.
But what we're going to do in the interest of time, because it's just hit 7:45, so we're ready for our break, and that means that you've got 15 minutes to go have some pie, have a comfort stop, chat, get those selfies with the politicians, because I want to see your posts, because I want to know who's going to take those home. But our last question is this, so we're going to address it as soon as we come back to the room at 8 o'clock. How does your party consider the intergenerational impact of the decisions you make as representatives? And now a few of you have started touching on this.
I was slightly confused about the question there. I think you can take it two ways, but I'll address both of them. First of all, I'll be utterly disappointed if any party or any government doesn't consider the future of the country when they come out with policies and pathways of lines of pathways of policies. I think that Barbara said it before as well, that we all are on the same page in regards to wanting to make it a better place. It's just how we get there. So I think that I honestly believe that we do consider the younger generation when we make policies for the future. If we're talking about engagement, I think that we're doing a terrible job. I think we're getting better. If we compare ourselves 50 years ago, and no matter what sort of demographic we're talking about, we've got more women in politics, we've got more Māori in politics, we've got more young people in politics, and we are going through a transition phase at the moment, and I think that we are on the way up in regards to engagement with young people. I just want to touch on what I said before. I think that we need to make sure that we're not just entertaining young people to get them out to vote, but we need to make sure that we engage them in a proper way as well.
Right, okay. You've changed it up. So a lot of Act's policies really do consider the millennial generation, because our generation are paying higher tax than the previous generation through inflation, and we would like to target our taxes and pin them to our wage inflation. So currently someone who's earning, I don't know, say $80,000 a year versus someone who was earning $80,000 10 years ago, we're now paying more tax than they did because the tax bracket is correct. So after that, we've got housing, and it's a supply side issue. We're just not building enough. We've got superannuation, and if we don't put it up now, that's $58 billion more dollars that is going to be paid by our generation. There are so many different policies, but I'll just keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, I think for me, as a party, we have a pretty large group called the Young Nats, and we bounce a lot of ideas off our Young Nats. So we've got that group of people that we interact with, and they keep us in view of what they're actually thinking about. But also, for me, on a personal level, I have a lot of interaction in the rural space with young farmers. I do the interviews for the Young Farmers Contest from time to time. I do the interviews for the Dairy Industry Awards, and we get a chance to choose the questions. So, of course, I'm often the politician on the panel, so I'll throw in some intriguing questions of the day to see what people actually think. So, formally we can do that as groups, but it's just being out there and listening as often as we possibly can. So.
I guess for me, what's an important policy that the Opportunity Party has promoted in the last election is the universal basic income. At the moment, we currently have that, and that's with our superannuitants. And there's some, as you've heard Gareth say, why would you give me money to go and buy another Harley Davidson? So it's about rethinking just where we put that money. And he says, why don't we actually give it to the families and who have young children who really, really need it? So that's looking at the intergenerational, that there are some of us, and there are some that need superannuation, but there are some of us that don't. So I think that that's a good start. Looking at our taxes, looking at the way that we are progressive about our taxes and making sure that everyone's paying their fair share. Because we do all ride the roads, we do all use hospital from time to time. So yeah, making sure that there's a spread across the board, and it's not just the salary and wage earners that are paying the bulk of the taxes. Gosh, I've got a number of policies here, so I don't know how much.
Cut you off.
but go onto our website. We've got some really progressive policies. Kia ora.
Well, I love this question because for me, actually, this is the whole reason the Green Party exists, is to think about these kind of issues. So one of my favourite things about the Green Party is that we have a charter and it has 5 principles. So those stand aside from any individual's kind of opinion within the party, and it means every single one of our decisions has to filter through that. So those 5 are honouring te tiriti, they are non-violence, appropriate decision making, which is like the right people making the right decisions at the right levels kind of thing. And also, yeah, did I say non-violence? Ecological wisdom and social responsibility. So I think if you look at all of those things together, and that is the filter we have to put all of our decisions and policies through, you are inherently going to be making good decisions for future generations and for current generations. There's some real trade-offs that we're kind of touching on tonight around superannuation and things like that. And for some people, absolutely, they have significant income, and for other people, the group of our elder citizens who are in poverty is really significant. So the most effective way for a state to administer something like that is a universal benefit. But yeah, it's interesting, hey, the justice issues within groups and across groups, and so I think having a set of values that you can filter yourself and your decisions through really prevents you from your own investment and positioning within an issue, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, I think it's a great question as well, whoever came up with it. Because within politics, there's quite a bit of short-termism. You have a 3-year electoral cycle. You know, previous governments have sort of been, okay, how do I get re-elected? But 3 years is way too short. The American Indians have a saying that do something now that will benefit in 7 generations' time. That's sort of their philosophy. The Chinese and other cultures have a lot longer term thinking, but we're very short-term thinking here, and that's one of the reasons why, as politicians, so it's important we get a bit more consensus around issues. Around some issues we have done that, but we haven't done it on health and education. Are probably 2 of the biggies, and I would be very keen to have a bit more consensus. Education, for example, over in Finland, the governments there, both different sides of the spectrum. They basically settled on an education consensus, and it stayed strong, and they've got they're regularly top of education right across the country. So we need to move away from the short term.
Awesome. All right, so now this takes us to your turn. Q&A.
So I wrote this down because I'm not very good with speaking this, but I'll just ramble. So on YouTube, I've seen heaps of videos.
Name.
Oh yeah, I'm Joe. I'm a law student. I'm just finishing off my degree. So I've seen a lot of videos on Facebook and social media sites that talk about innovative technologies in other countries that develop environmentally friendly processes for sustainable environment stuff like alternative fuel development, processes for rubbish and recycling. And I was just wondering what you guys think New Zealand is or should be doing to develop similar technology, or should we be doing anything? What are the barriers to doing it? If we lack the infrastructure, why are we not doing anything about developing the infrastructure?
So one of the things that we did at the last election was talk about a green investment bank, and so that is basically designed to meet that kind of need and to enable us to innovate. In terms of alternative fuel sources, there's an amazing opportunity, and in terms of closing loop cycles, right, like forestry industry, and we could actually, if we were to implement a whole lot of efficiency gains with our car systems, blah, 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 there's a remaining need for liquid fuels, and we can essentially meet that with second generation biofuels from wood. So huge opportunities there, given we have a really massive forestry industry, and that helps us address climate change and things as well. So I think there's many, many beautiful opportunities out there, and we should be taking advantage of them. Yeah. So we hope that the Green Investment Bank enables us to put forth the capital and to kind of help stimulate people and support them in developing that kind of stuff.
I actually think this whole area is where the Green Party falls flat.
Now we're talking.
No, entertain the idea. We could always do better.
No, well, it's true. And it's one of the things that led me away from the Greens Party. So, you know, the Greens Party is all about feelings, but it doesn't actually have the policies to back themselves up on environmental issues.
I'm feeling upset.
So, I saw, I think it was the Spin-Off, and had an article a couple of months back about genetically modified ryegrass. And currently in our labs in New Zealand, they've created grass which, when fed to cows, lowers the methane production from cows. But because of our GMO laws that the Greens Party really loves, you can't actually plant this in New Zealand soil. So we have solutions to climate change, but because of these policies, we can't actually use them.
Take away, Sam.
Yeah, I was just it was good to actually hear Brooke talk about the agricultural front, because I was actually going to answer your question, Joe, by saying that anyone who can find some technology that actually takes care of methane is going to do our country a huge favour. And I guess Brooke's touched on it a little bit. I tend to call it gene editing rather than the whole genetic modification thing, but there are ryegrasses. And there also are gene editing options that can help us with our environmental issues in terms of pests and myrtle rusts and biosecurity and that sort of stuff. And I think I compare it a little bit with the debate that we're having at the moment, and I call it medically assisted dying rather than euthanasia, because it's actually about people not choosing to die, but people who actually have, you know, a terminal illness. But I think we've got to be grown up enough to have that debate around some of the technology that we can use in the future, because there's a heap of smart technology that we can use to improve our waterways, to get rid of some of the runoff off some of our farms and things like that. So yes, technology definitely.
Hey Sam, Sam, this is, I should have controlled this a little bit better, because everyone's got great views on all of these questions. How about we have 2 responses per one question so that we can get around the group?
For a bundle, I've got 3 points.
Shall we give all the chances?
Oh God, it better be worth it.
Before I hand the mic over, she does have a lot to say on this topic. I just want to say that the Opportunity Party comes from a real practical perspective. The first one is that polluters pay. The second one is put a moratorium on intensification and irrigation. Also put a levy on commercial water uses, resolve the water treaty claims, and also having a levy for tourists. But I just want to come from a practical perspective.
Okay, you ready? I've actually got 4 things to say. So the first thing is that I think actually feelings are really important, and maybe we should bring them into Parliament more, because we have them all the time. So second thing is actually there's a really crunchy issue here in terms of genetic engineering, because, question, can we address climate change through technological solutions, or do we fundamentally need to make a more structural, systemic change to society? I would argue that it's the latter. There are 2 parallel crises, right? One is biodiversity loss, which cannot have a technological solution. That is fundamentally a development problem. Climate change, we like to think we can solve it with flash fixes. That means we don't have to think about our lives, the way that we live, the way we've structured society, we don't have to change anything. Technological solutions will be very important because it's happening now, we need to address it immediately, but it's maybe not the whole solution. We'll also, sorry. Was that enough?
That's enough. Yeah. Oh, okay, let's jump on to our next question. But Jamie, we'll jump on to our next question, which is this gentleman here.
Hey guys, my name's Lucas, and I'm an engineer. My question was basically around whether you think in New Zealand or it's a problem and how we prevent the issue of politics becoming about popularity and entertainment, and how we really make sure that we're sticking to the issues.
And Jamie can answer this because I cut him off before, and then just one other speaker.
Yeah, no worries. We have had a change as a bit more presidential at the moment. So from my point of view, a lot of people voted for the National Party last time because of John Key, and possibly a lot of people voted for the Labour Party because of Jacinda Ardern. People voted for New Zealand First around Liston Peters. So
That was Velden.
before. No one knows who he was, so no, but there is an aspect of that presidential around the leadership is becoming a lot stronger. I'm not sure what you can do about that. You sort of talk policy, people's eyes sort of glaze over, generally. But I mean, I can maybe if you get the right policies, then that might happen. I mean, the one time when students have voted en masse, that I understand was back in 2005, when the Labour government were going to take interest off the student loans. So if you get the right issue policy, but generally I think personality has probably taken over a little bit.
Can I just respond to that? Because I think policy is really important. The whole reason why I joined the Opportunities Party is because you knew what you were getting. So before you went to the polling booth, you knew exactly what our policies were. So it wasn't actually based on personality, even though Gareth Morgan, some of the New Zealanders have voted because of personality.
Personality is not as important as policy, but Darroch wants to have a say.
Oh, thanks, Steve. I did bring it up before. I think it actually is one of the major issues around our democracy right now, and I think that it's going to get worse if we don't do something about it. Globally, as well as in New Zealand, we're catching up a lot with the clickbait and sensationalism, and it's got a lot to do with the culture that we're in at the moment, the social media culture, the instant gratification culture, and there is a part, obviously, about engagement, like I said before, about policy, but it 100% is not all just one way. If we as a country and voters want to be informed, and we want to make sure we're making the right decisions, we've got to get off our bums and make sure we go and look at what the policies are, why we're voting and what for. It's not just, and I think what's given the environment for this to occur is that the lack of voter apathy. And so parliamentarians are thinking, how am I going to get someone to vote for me? I'll get them to like me. I'll get them to click on my link or something to that effect. And so it's all been one way, and we've got to this point now where it's such an imbalance where a lot of voters, a vast majority of voters, don't know what they're actually voting for. They know who they're voting for, not so sure why.
Hello, my name is Andrea. I moved in February from Colombia, and I'm really curious about your views related to immigration.
Well, we welcome immigrants. We have a productive country, and we have a lot of businesses who, if they didn't have immigrants working for them, they wouldn't have workers, and we wouldn't have such a productive society. And so the National Party view is we welcome them. Obviously there's criteria around that, but I've got a lot of immigrants working in my electorate, and we are fully appreciative of what immigrants do.
In regards to the Opportunity Party, we welcome high-skilled migrants. We close the gateway to low-skilled workers, reform the point system and pathway to residency, give Kiwis jobs first, longer qualifying period for super to 10 years, and refugee quota to OECD standards. Kia ora.
Yeah, I could speak on behalf of the coalition government. Basically what we want to do is focus on the regions, because there's a shortage in the regions, and so we're creating a regional skills list. So when immigrants come into New Zealand, rather than just all sort of going to Auckland and bumping up house prices and stuff, when we've got regions struggling, and so we're working around policies around when immigrants come, to focus on where the needs are. But also raising up New Zealanders as well, who to fill those skill shortage. The reality is we're all immigrants, so my family came in 1850, so it doesn't matter when we came here, we're all immigrants. Those are sort of a little bit more nuanced rather than just anyone come whenever they want, go wherever they want. So we're going to be a bit more focused.
Abortion law reform has been a big part of the discussion process this year. So my question for you is, how is your party in tune with issues young women are facing in this area of today? And I'm also curious to know if you do consider abortion to be a health law issue, or if you do see it as a criminal law issue as it currently is.
Can we have Jamie answer this particularly? And I'm going to put him on the spot. It's because during the election we spoke to a conservative church and he said he was opposed to it and he thinks abstinence should be taught as part of sex ed. And in the university magazine he said it was a health issue. So, Jamie!
It's a good point you brought up, and actually I was that close to being aborted myself. So back in 1976, when I was born, basically my mum became pregnant, and she wasn't with my father at the time. They were separated. And then the doctor said that you can have an abortion, we can send you to Australia, you can get the abortion done, blah, blah, blah. But what happened was her sister and her workmate both said, if you have the baby, then I'll take the baby. So she had that support. And I think the fundamental aspect around it is support, is women having support. And if moving the abortion, if changing the abortion law, so moving to the Health Act, provides more support for women, then I'm all for that. And so the interesting thing for me is that, and I appreciate this debate coming up, and I think it will come up when Andrew Little brings back his findings. And so that'll be the key thing I'll be looking for.
Good job.
Yeah, that's the key thing I'll be looking for, is where can women get the most support. At the moment, I'm not sure it's working as well as it should be.
I would just say, the Green Party support it, should definitely be out of the Crimes Act, and the support point is a really good one. I guess how we stay in touch with women's views would be that the Green Party is really grassrootsy democratic party members contribute a lot to policy. Also, I would say a number of our MPs, we've got more women than many MPs, and we've got quite young women as well. Just pretty big advocates for it, I think. Especially having men legislate around women's bodies is pretty uncomfortable. So,
all right.
So my question is sort of specifically for Sam, but any other guys would like to contribute. So my personal favourite policy in water care is ACT's policy, which kind of advocates for property rights and tradable water rights. Now, I know you said you're passionate about the environment, I don't mean to associate you with the Greens just on that basis, but either way, you did say that. So I want to know, what in particular do you not agree with it, or do you completely agree with it?
Actually, we were just talking about this. There are some strands of acts that are really similar with the Green Party, and I think that's around social liberalism and things. Property rights, water rights, not sure we'd agree so much on that, but...
Why don't you agree? That's what I'm asking, so I'm asking you to critique the policy for me.
Well, I don't know their policies very well. Sorry.
You said you're in the Greens Party for the last year, so when you consider with the other policies of all the major parties, that's what I want to see, is what you guys would do differently.
Yeah,
that's why I'm asking this question, so...
Fair play.
If you like, I could read it out for you. I'll go on the slide, or perhaps Brooke.
We don't have time for you.
So I guess I can tell you one thing that I really like about the Green Party policy is that we would support schemes like, I'm forgetting the name of it, you might have to remind me, over in Taupo they have a really collaborative, beyond riparian planting, looking at all sorts of things like that. So I really like ground-led, community-led schemes and systems, and I think politics should get behind and support that as much as possible. Happy to talk details with you more later, but I haven't spent my spare time reading their policy because I'm just a volunteer, actually. I have a full-time job and I'm studying.
Awesome,
so.
nice one, Sam. Alright, so we've got our second to last. Donna.
No, it's really important. It's really important because the Opportunity Party says, let's start with Māori first, and they actually say that Māori own the water. So I just want to say, let's start with that and then we'll look at other policies. Kia ora.
So I have a question. It's around the gap between government paid money, like student allowances and job seeker support payment and stuff like that. So I personally think that there is a gap between the low income paid people that go to work and the people that get paid an allowance. I'll use an example for myself. So I studied here at the University of Waikato and I was entitled to an allowance because my parents didn't earn enough and all that sort of stuff. However, there's a thing in the requirements that you're not allowed to work over 20 hours a week when you're getting paid an allowance. So I personally feel like that limited me to grow my work experience while I was at uni. So I worked 3 jobs and was very naughty and went over my 20 hours a week because I needed experience to gain after I finished my degree. I want to know which party supports in closing that gap and also with other sort of stuff.
Well, can I just say that what you just said was awesome, and a lot of the reason that a lot of part-time work has been restricted, even to people with secondary jobs at the moment, is because of the whole technical ability of the IRD to be able to manage that on a daily basis, and so it's kind of been restricted to stop people having a big bill at the other end of it. So IRD is finally starting to come into the modern age that it's never been in. But I'm really drawn. We don't have a policy on developed yet on what you just said. But I just think if people are prepared to work hard and get work experience, and we're always looking for enthusiastic, bright young people, then what you said is an issue worth taking into account. Thank you.
Can I just answer that? Gosh, we might have future voters for the Opportunities Party, because the whole basis of the universal basic income is to stop people from dropping between the nets. And it also allows students to go out and earn their income as well. So you start off with the universal basic income and you can still go to work.
So my question has to do with what Sam said about that girl and her story. Since I have started high school, I've begun to notice changes in my peers and the lack of support they're getting. I have childhood friends, neighbours who have turned to drugs and alcohol. I have friends self-harming, pulling their hair out from the stress of NCEA. And we've had a student commit suicide because of bullying and antisocial behaviour. So my question to you is, what are your parties planning on doing to support and nurture the youth of New Zealand?
No, Steve, right?
Oh, okay.
I'm happy to kick things off though. The Green Party, we have a policy of having free counselling for everyone under 25. So we obviously really need that to have really skilled and available counsellors. But I think counselling, what I've seen, it's really it's not addressing the fundamental problems that are causing those issues. So it's a really great support to help you through a really tough time, but it doesn't fundamentally change anything. The things that we need to change, I think, are pretty deep, and I think they relate to housing, and they also relate to domestic violence and to the lives that children have lived to get to the point that they don't have the skills to cope with the stress of NCEA. So I think there's actually a huge raft of things in that to change, and that all of those changes really need to benefit young people, and that needs to be at the heart of what we do. I want to give these guys a chance to answer, because I think that your question is amazing. I think it's so great that you're here and you've come and you've noticed this and you're doing something about it. So I will talk to you more about specifics later, but just massive ups.
Yeah, hey Rosie, I used to teach Kuriger. Look, I think it's great that you're showing leadership yourself in terms of your blogging, in terms of your YouTube, what you're doing. So well done for being a leader. Well, one of the key policies that we have leading up to the election, which we're working as a coalition government around, is putting nurses in high schools with a specific focus around mental health. Yeah, because particularly our suicide rate is an absolute blight on our society. It's something we've got to do.
Do you know, one thing they're doing that I think is actually better than that is that because nurses are referrers, right? Your nurses are going to refer to your specialist services, and our specialist services are way oversubscribed. So actually one of the things that is happening is that the government has increased the number of internships for educational psychologists, child and family psychologists and things like this from 9 to 35. So that's not going to take effect immediately, but in time, when those people are registered psychologists, there will be specialist services for those nurses to refer to, which I think is probably more important than the nurses themselves. We've got a lot of referrers, we need specialist services.
And this is a really important take for me because I lost a brother and my brother's son to suicide. And so there are many reasons for suicide. With the community that I work with in Hamilton West, a lot of it has to do with poverty, stress of poverty, lack of food, the health system itself. So with the Opportunities Party, we want to get back into the community and start funding the communities because they believe that the community knows best. They know the community the best. So we want to drive it from the bottom up.
Community absolutely knows best, and at the moment I've had a petition going on. Going to present to the Health Select Committee at the end of this month. It's for the Rural Health Alliance, trying to work out what rural health means close to home. Doing that fundamental stuff, always working with the Rural Support Trust. I'm really disappointed on two fronts. It was $1 for every person who lived in rural New Zealand to look at rural health, and the government has actually turned it down, and I'm wanting to change their minds. And secondly, last week you would have noticed that National put a call out for some cross-party work on mental health, and the government didn't accept that offer. So Darroch and Jamie, please reconsider, because it's a big issue. And I certainly know in rural New Zealand with droughts and mycoplasma bovis and all of that stuff that's going on, people are under intense pressure, and we can have a whole lot of psychologists and we need to have all the right professional people, but it's about communities looking after each other, and we need the right foundations for that.
I'll be quite quick. There is no one in government that knows how to solve this mental health problem. There's no person in any political party that can say, I have the solution to this. And anyone who does say that is just lying. But what we can do is say, you know what, someone who lives in Wellington doesn't know what goes on in specific communities, but the communities themselves do. And so ACT says that we would give $25 million to community-based providers to see what solutions they can come out with as a pilot program, because nothing is working.
We've heard about the major ones already, which will always be the case, which is education, health, poverty, etc. I think that those things as major issues, especially comes around election time, it's always going to be highlighted. But we've always had issues with those things. We're always going to have issues with those things. I think one of the major reasons, one part of the reason why our youth we've got such a high suicide rate is because of the absolute challenges that they're facing, the young generation is facing these days, especially around technology. And so we've got social media, and you can connect yourself with someone around outside of the world at age 9. When I was 9, there was no such thing as the internet. So the challenges and that young people are facing today are 1,000 times different and more extreme than when I was at the same age. Part of the problem is that our health system, mental health system, hasn't caught up because it's going so fast that we're still stuck in the past about how to deal with mental health issues, about how we dealt when I was young. So I think that's the massive challenge, is that we've got to come up with a way to keep up with the issues. And I think the biggest one from my personal point of view, because I was a school teacher, and that's one of the places where you can see this happening on the front line, is although all the technology is there, you connect yourself with anyone in the world instantaneously, it actually increases the isolation of the young person and the problems in internalising everything like that. So I think that's, if we can come up with a solution and how to identify that and give support, then I think we'll be well on the way.